Welcome to the Alison Howard podcast, where high achieving women elevate their identity, expand what's possible, and create a life of true abundance. I'm Alison Howard. Let's dive in. All right, who wants to become more magnetic? I'm sure we all do, right? And I want to talk to you about how your frequency, your vibration, shapes your reality. But stick with me here. This is not the woo-woo stuff that you hear all the time. This is going to be rooted. So I want you to trust me. If this is new to you, this is not scary. So welcome back to the podcast, or if you're watching me on YouTube, hello. Today, I want to explore a concept that can sometimes feel abstract or even uncomfortable, depending on your background, your faith background. And that is the idea of frequency. So for some listeners, viewers, this language feels really natural. It feels intuitive. For others, particularly those who are rooted in strong faith tradition, words like energy, vibration, or frequency, they may raise some understandable questions or skepticism. And I get it. I was raised in church. I've worked in women's ministry. I've spoken at women's events. I've led Bible studies for years. So I get it. My husband and I led the marriage study at church. I'm right there with you. Okay. So I want this to feel just like an open dialogue, okay? A conversation between us. So rather than asking you to simply accept the concept, I want to ground this conversation in something that is much more stable, observable reality and lived human experience. Because those are two things that I think will be just very um, truthful and approachable as we talk about this. Because whether we describe it scientifically or psychologically or spiritually, we are pointing toward something that is constantly happening all around us. And that is that nothing is at rest, everything is in motion. So nothing is static, okay? Everything is in motion. One of the most fundamental principles of this physical universe that we're in is that matter is never truly still. Even objects that appear solid and unmoving are actually composed of atoms that are vibrating at specific frequencies. So movement exists at levels that we cannot see with the naked eye, but that doesn't mean they're not real. They are real nonetheless, even though we can't see them. This desk that I'm sitting at, if I viewed it through a microscope, I would see movement, okay? And this isn't philosophy that I'm talking about here. This is physics. Back to science. We did science last week. We're doing science again this week. But no, really, I want you to understand that creation itself is dynamic. And I just find it really fascinating that scripture opens not with stillness, but with movement, with formation, with creative force. And there is a sense of divine animation, of life emerging, of something being brought into form. And when we speak about vibration or frequency, we're not stepping outside of reality. We're actually describing the nature of reality itself. So I hope that makes you feel a little bit better wherever you're coming from in your belief system. So now I want to talk about frequency in the human experience because we've all experienced this. We're going to move from physics into something even more relatable. All right, imagine this. You've walked into a room before, right? And instantly sensed something. Whether that something was tension, whether it was warmth, whether it was discomfort or ease, before a single word was ever spoken, you have felt something before. You've met someone and immediately felt drawn toward them or guarded around them without even consciously analyzing it. That is vibration. That is energy. That is frequency. We even use language like this all the time. She has a really calming presence. Or the energy in that meeting felt really heavy. Or I don't know, there was just an awkward vibe there. Or "Ugh, he walked in and he lit up the room." So none of this requires any mysticism to understand. Human beings are exquisitely sensitive to emotional and nervous system cues. Some are more sensitive than others, but our bodies are constantly reading micro signals. And those are typically posture, breath, how someone's breathing, tone, tension, coherence. In fact, I studied when I was in college, I minored in American Sign Language. And we learned back then, and this was in the early 2000s, that 85% of communication is nonverbal. That shows that we are very energetic beings. Okay. So what we call a vibe is often just your nervous system, your very intuitive nervous system detecting another person's internal state. So let's talk about what frequency really means. Because when I use the word frequency, I'm not asking you to adopt an unfamiliar belief system. I'm describing your dominant internal state. So your frequency reflects your habitual emotional patterns, your nervous system baseline. Your frequency reflects your expectations, your sense of self. It is the state that you repeatedly live from. Okay. Your frequency is the state that you repeatedly live from. It's not the mood that you visit occasionally. You may have heard the saying, I think I've said it in a previous podcast, your mood does not manifest. So if you're trying to create an amazing, abundant life, but you're in a bad season, you're in a sad season, your mood's not going to manifest. Your state may be of a happy, joyful, grateful human who's going through a really hard situation. So your internal state is what you manifest from. So a woman who's anchored in chronic stress, she's going to move through life very differently than a woman who has been anchored in grounded self-trust. And a woman who operates from lack, she just has this lack limiting mindset. She communicates a different presence than one that's rooted in enough, one that's rooted in sufficiency. So frequency is your internal climate. Okay. And I want to talk about why it's magnetic. So your internal state influences how you perceive opportunities. If you're a negative person, when an opportunity comes around, you're going to think about all the reasons why it's not convenient, why it's not good for you, why it's going to take too much time, they're not paying enough money, right? That's your internal state. If you're a different type of person, if you have an internal state that is grateful, that is expectant of amazing opportunities, you're going to perceive opportunities in such a different way. Your internal state influences how you respond to challenges. Your internal state also influences how other people experience you. And your internal state influences what feels possible or impossible for you. So when your nervous system is regulated, which means it's calm, it feels safe, all is well, and your identity is congruent, then you naturally project a steadiness about yourself, a clarity, a confidence. When your internal state, your internal world is chaotic, confused, conflicted, contracted, then life often mirrors that instability. So this is not magic in any way, shape, or form. This is interaction. Okay. So I want to explain why this matters, especially for women who are rooted in faith. For my Christian listeners, my sisters, I want to say something really important. Acknowledging frequency does not remove God from the equation. It deepens your understanding of participation. So you are not separate from creation. You are within creation. You are created as a creative being by a creator. Your thoughts, your emotions, and your states of being are part of how you engage with the life that God has given you. And when you are somebody who is joyful, who is grateful, the fruits of the Spirit, right? When you are somebody who has embraced those fruits in your life and your life produces fruit, people respond to you differently. You have a different frequency that you put off. When you are somebody who is selfish and greedy and negative and mean, you have a different experience with life and people react to that frequency that you're putting off. Is this making sense? I hope so. So how do you cultivate a magnetic frequency? How do you cultivate that beautiful frequency that draws more goodness into your life? Well, you have to shift your frequency, and it begins with number one, awareness. Notice your dominant emotional baseline. Where are you set at? What is your temperature? Okay, your emotional baseline. And then regulate. So practice stillness. Practice breathing. Practice nervous system safety. When we're always in fight or flight, we are activated. We are wired. But when we're practicing stillness, we talked about this last week, meditation, journaling, visualization, gratitude, just being still. The Bible says, be still and know that I am God. How do you connect with source if you're never still? How do you connect with your creator if you're never still? Practice stillness, practice breathing. Our breathing is, if we're running on stress, our breathing is often short and shallow. Deep breaths, filling those lungs. Okay. Also, cultivating a magnetic frequency happens through your environment. So, choosing mental inputs intentionally. What are you watching? What are you listening to? What are you setting before your eyes and your ears? I remember a song when I was a child. If you grew up in church, you probably know this one. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. So, what are you seeing? What are you listening to? What words are coming out of your mouth? So, what does your thought environment look like? Identity. Asking yourself, what state characterizes the woman I am becoming? Especially when you're in a state that you do not feel congruent with. You do not feel aligned with a particular state. Maybe you just shouted at your kid and you're like, ugh, what state characterizes the woman I am becoming? Great question to ask yourself. And it just causes reflection and awareness. You don't have to be mean to yourself. And then gratitude. Just retraining perception towards sufficiency, towards having enough. Okay, so a little personal reflection here in my own life. Everything really began shifting for me when I stopped trying to control outcomes and I began stabilizing my internal state. My presence changed first, and then my results changed. And so I was an anxious child, I was a busy child, I was a performance-driven child. And so I had to and I was I was a firstborn child with some, as all of our families, most of our families have some dysfunction in the family. And although I love my parents were wonderful people. There were things that were difficult about my childhood. And so control became a drug for me. If I could just control everything around me, then I didn't feel scared. And so I had to learn as I grew up how to stabilize my internal state, how to go with the flow. My presence had to change first, and then I saw results start changing. So if this conversation has resonated with you, if you're wanting to learn more about your baseline emotional level, about vibration, about frequency, about how who you are attracts everything that you have in your life, then I want to invite you to my live Zoom event that's coming up. It's April 8th, 9th, and 10th. I would love for you to be there. It's not all day, it's an hour and a half each of those days, but it is going to be intentional coaching around how to cultivate an internal state that supports the life that you desire. So, I want to remind you that nothing in creation is static. Everything is in motion all the time. Your internal world is no exception to this rule. Your emotional baseline, your nervous system state, your dominant thoughts are shaping how you move through life and how life responds to you. A pastor, a coach that I used to work with several years ago used to always tell me, your life is moving in the direction of your most dominant thoughts. Take inventory of your thoughts. It tells us in the Bible to take inventory, to renew our thoughts constantly. So, this isn't about becoming someone artificial. This is about becoming someone who's actually more aligned. Okay. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for being here with me today. I know your time is precious. Okay. I'm so grateful that you spend some of it with me. All right. Now, like I say every week, go and be the woman that your future is waiting on. All right. I'll see you all next week. Be blessed.